Hi, Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for March 10th, 2024. Under security and privacy alerts, we're seeing some big scale sabotage. A number of underwater fiber optic internet cables under the Red Sea have been cut. This reduces the capacity for traffic between Europe and Asia by about 25%, which is significant. While the carriers are working hard to reroute traffic elsewhere, these four cables apparently were intentionally cut. And it's not that hard to do if you have a diver and know where the cables are and such, because they just lay on the ocean floor. We're counting on people being civilized and not cutting the communications cables. The Yemeni government warned a couple of weeks ago that the Houthis might try to target these cables, and that could be legit, or it could have been a signal to the Houthis to go out and say, maybe you ought to cut these cables. Like I said, not that hard, not that deep. Definitely could be done. We don't know. Now, the challenge here is, at least for one of the cables, as an example, they say that it might take a month or two just to get the necessary permits to go off and try to put the cable back together. So that's not good, especially if whoever sabotaged these cables decides that, well, more is better and let's go cut a few more cables. At some point in time, you don't have enough capacity to reroute traffic, and then the communications between Europe and Asia have to go by way of satellite, and that creates all kinds of problems. So let's hope that this was a one-off incident. To be honest with you, I'm not counting on that. So we shall see what happens. Next, there's a scam, which I've talked about before, called pig butchering, which is a scam where bad guys go off and convince people to invest money with the promise of kind of get rich quick, going off and making ridiculous returns. Hence the concept pigs, right? And then they go off and steal all of their money. And the schemes vary, but in precisely how they work, but fundamentally they all work that way. And now the law enforcement guys are saying that that the losses from these scams, based on just tracking cryptocurrency, was about $75 billion over 4 years. As we well know, a lot of people don't report these scams. So, 75 million is probably a low end of that number, and it's probably a lot more than that. Some people say it's only 10 or 20%, of the scams that get reported. So it could be a whole lot more than that. Suffice it to say, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. Next, in the software and hardware to check out, Twitter has added in-app calling. It is on by default. The only restriction is that you must have communicated one time with the person who is trying to call you. It appears that there's no encryption on these calls. So it's kind of like shouting across the room to another person in terms of anything you say. Your IP address is leaked by default. There is an alternative where you can trust Twitter with all your communications, which I wouldn't particularly trust, not because it has anything to do with Twitter. But in any case, there's a lot of other options like Signal and WhatsApp, Facebook, even Facebook calling, that are encrypted end to end, much to the chagrin, as well as Apple calls. I would say, if you have the Twitter app, this doesn't work on the website yet, only in the app. If you have the app, I would recommend turning off this feature. And I don't see any pluses to using it, other than it gives Twitter a little bit more traffic, and I don't know that that's a plus right now. Next, Microsoft is killing off Android for Windows. They didn't say why, but they did say support will end on March 5th of next year. So, basically a year from now. They have not explained what's going to happen on that, whether the apps are just going to stop working, or whether you can continue to use the apps and they just don't get updates anymore, or whether the apps will be exploded and disappear off your phone. Not clear. So or off your computer rather. So if you are using Android for Windows, any applications that use Android for Windows, be aware of this, and I would say look for alternatives. In the patches department, Apple is patching another group of critical 0 days. These particular 0 days will provide total system compromise, so not great, obviously. And the result, is also could give you an opportunity for lateral side movement into corporate networks. So this is, the I'll talk about it in a second. This is the same Apple that's saying, the same company that governments in Europe are saying, we need to trust these guys because we don't have the resources to do it ourselves. Now, in fairness, everybody's got bugs, but to think that at this point, any piece of software is bulletproof, I don't care who makes it, is probably, shall we say, optimistic. That would be a polite way. And next, in the important issues and patches department, a bunch of EU agencies, Apple is finally allowing, but only in the EU, side loading of apps, or loading of apps from other places other than the Apple App Store. They're not very happy about this. They are extracting a bit of a pound of flesh from these new App Store upstarts, but there's still going to be a bunch of them. And these government agencies are concerned that this Apple walled garden is beginning to show a few cracks. Not very wisely, these agencies are saying, well, we actually don't have the resources to protect our own infrastructure, so we're hoping, praying that Apple is going to do it for us. That's not really a very smart move. Anybody that does that is really hoping for the impossible. You have to be responsible for protecting your own stuff. And I know it costs money, and that's always a challenge. But outsourcing that to a vendor who has other motives, and I'm not saying Apple's bad, not far from it, but I do think that to go off and hope that a vendor is going to go protect you is probably a wee bit optimistic. Next, in the legislative and legal department, Jack Teixeira, who is that former Massachusetts Air National Guardsman, who was arrested for selling secrets to the Chinese. Remember, he had a top secret security clearance, access to crypto codes because of what he did, and he was sharing all kinds of top secret information on the social media platform Discord because he wanted to prove how cool he was to his friends. He was a bit disillusioned, he says, with the military after signing up. And, I'm guessing he's not the only person on the planet who thought he was getting into something that turned out not to be exactly what he thought, but, so be it. That's the way that is. And now that he is been caught, he pleaded guilty. Prosecutors are asking for 16 years, so we'll see what they get. But not good. And this is the classic insider threat problem. You have a person, you think the person is trustworthy, and it turns out for whatever reason that person has ulterior motives and is going to sell you out. And next, also in the legal department, Apple has been fined about $2 billion by the EU over its App Store rules. Apple continues to press this and hope that the outcome is going to be different. I don't think the outcome is going to be different, but they're going to keep going for it for as long as they can. And the EU says, after $1.8 billion in fines, that Apple is creating an uneven playing field for the streaming music platform, which I think is fair. iTunes clearly has a significant advantage over every other platform. And that goes even to the extent of people like Spotify aren't even allowed to tell people that you could get Spotify for less money if you go to Spotify's website rather than buying it through the Apple Store. That's part of what the EU is saying is unfair. But Apple is saying, well, gee, we've built all this infrastructure and we provide all these customers, and so therefore us getting 30% of the take is not unreasonable, which you can understand why they're saying that, but the EU apparently disagrees with them. And so $1.8 billion, that's just one of many fines that Apple is facing. I think for the most part, they're going to lose most of these battles, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to try. Next, the owner of Change Healthcare, which is owned by United Health Group, is reported to have paid a ransom of $22 million. This is the reason why these ransomware gangs continue to be very successful, very profitable, and very rich. The government is not terribly happy about that, but in many cases, the IT situation that these people are dealing with, is problematic. The customers of Change, who are hospitals, pharmacies, and doctors' offices, they're saying that some of these folks are losing like $100 million a day. Those are big guys. But still, the Florida Health Association said that healthcare providers in Florida alone, by the time this is over, it'll have cost them about $1 billion. And Florida is far from the biggest state. So, this is a big deal. They paid the $22 million reportedly, and we shall see what happens. But there's a fight going on in the underground. Apparently, the organization of crooks that they paid this ransom to did not share. If you go look in their report card, it says does not play well with others. And so the group that actually took Change Health down says they didn't get paid. This is war, and they still have 4 terabytes of data that maybe they'll go sell, or maybe they'll go publish, or whatever. So this is the downside of paying hackers. No honor amongst thieves. And we may find out this didn't work out so well for Change. Don't know. Next, another law firm. This one is the Hauser Law Firm, which specializes in taking care of high-profile financial institutions. Like, for example, Citibank is one of their customers. They lost data on 325,000 of their customers' data. Now they have to go explain to people like Citi, sorry, I'm not trying to tell you this, but we kind of made a boo-boo, and now your customers, your very wealthy, high-profile customers' data is now out on the dark web. Wouldn't want to be the guy that has to deliver that message. I don't think it's going to be taken very well by these large financial institutions. Expect lawsuits to follow. United Healthcare is very big, which is good, I suppose. But nonetheless, that's going to be a problem. In terms of, as I said a minute ago, the impact of these supply chain attacks, and that's what this Change Healthcare attack is. It's a supply chain attack. That is, as I said, going to cost these organizations millions and millions of dollars. Whether they have the liquidity to power through this is unclear. Health and Human Services, the federal government, may wind up having to bail out some of these organizations because they don't have enough cash. And in part, it depends on how long it takes Change Health to get their act back together. But it's a complete mess. As I said, the Florida Hospital Association said that this attack will cost them over $1 billion, they estimate. And then some organizations it's costing them $100 million a day. And the question is, can you survive that kind on your scale, whatever your scale is? Can you survive that kind of cash flow crunch? And if you can't, then you better have a plan B for how to deal with that. Next, the Justice Department is going after cyber fraud in a big way. There is a law that's been around for about 150 years called the False Claims Act. The False Claims Act was enacted during the Civil War, and it's still applicable today. It protects the government when vendors make false reps and warrants about what they're doing. So in the case of cybersecurity, that could be claiming that you're following certain regulations when in fact you're not. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the breach. You could be sideways with the False Claims Act even if you never had a breach. Now here's the interesting part of the FCA, False Claims Act. The whistleblower, the person who turns you in, can get up to $30 million, or 30% rather, well more than $30 million. There's one recently. This was not a cybersecurity issue. This was a billing issue. But the company that settled with the government was Booz Allen Hamilton. They paid something north of $325 million, and the whistleblower got about $68 million. So very lucrative for the whistleblower. Whistleblower could be an employee who is annoyed that you're not listening to them. It could be an ex-employee that you fired for whatever reason. It could be a competitor. It could be any number of people. And the DOJ has actually set up a whole new team under Lisa Monaco, Assistant Attorney General, and their job is to go prosecute these guys. This particular case appears to be pretty blatant. It's against Georgia Institute of Technology and their subsidiaries. They claimed that they were in compliance with the DoD Security Standard 800-171. Turns out apparently not only were they not compliant with it, but when the IT security guys pointed this out, the supervisors in the food chain prohibited them from even telling their internal compliance folks that they were out of compliance. And they made a business decision not to stop billing the customer, even though they're in breach of contract. So I suspect there's a couple things going to happen now as a result of this. First of all, obviously, the folks at GIT, Georgia Institute of Technology, are going to be having a lot of explaining to do to the government, to a jury or a judge, whichever way that goes. I suspect they have hundreds and hundreds of contracts reportedly. They're going to be explaining to a lot of contracting officers why that contracting officer should not be peering down their throat with a microscope. And I think that there's going to be other contracting officers at other organizations, who are going to say, well, this happened to GIT. How do I know you're not doing the same thing? So beware, tell the truth, get your act together. And if you find a problem, don't try to hide it, because somebody may well out you at the thought of maybe making, a couple of tens of millions of dollars, at which point they don't have to work anymore. And it doesn't matter whether they're blackballed or not. And last, this week's News Bites story came out this week that apparently you can steal somebody's car through their headlight. You pull off the trim, you can get to a cable. From that cable, you can connect to the bus. From that bus, you can disable the alarm, you can unlock the doors, and you can even start the car. Pretty impressive. Has been demonstrated, actually works. Fidelity Life had information stolen on over 300,000 customers, and apparently it was really a very data-rich bucket of information, not great. LexisNexis is accused of retaliating against 30,000 police officers. Not a good place to be on, to have 30,000 cops all of a sudden looking for you and looking for things that you did or misdeeds that you did. And probably, if you call the cops in any jurisdiction, they might be a little more reluctant to help you if you have retaliated against their fellow police officers. Apple, going back to poor Apple, has been a bad week for Apple. Apple is now allowing users to sideload apps in the EU, that is to say, load them from another app store. But if that phone leaves the EU and doesn't come back within 30 days, those apps will no longer update. So basically, they're trying to protect themselves against a potential $8 billion fine. But beyond that, they don't really care about their users, which is not comforting. It would seem like, if you were legally able to load the app before, you should be able to update it. But apparently, this is their way of sort of revenge. But obviously, if you stay in the EU, not a problem. And And finally, Tim Cook, the head of Apple, says that they're about to break new ground on generative AI this year. As is typical for Apple, that's a teaser. We don't know what that means. We do know that they're behind some other folks. On the other hand, they said they're taking a cautious and measured approach to AI, unlike other people who just think this is a great money play and they don't really care what kind of collateral damage they're doing. Hopefully, Apple, in their being cautious about this, their desire is to do less damage, which would be a great thing, assuming that's the case. And I suspect it is. But, I certainly wouldn't count Apple out for anything. I think they have, obviously they have a lot of money and they have a lot of smart people. So could they do something smart? Yeah, they could definitely do something smart. So stay tuned for that. If this really is breaking new ground, and Apple has certainly done that in many different ways, we shall see, and it would be great. So at this point, that's all I have. And if obviously if we can help you, we'd be happy to do that. Please reach out to us. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching. For more information or to purchase this or any other of our board or executive services, visit us at cybersecurity.com. Call us at 303-887-5864 or email us at rh@cybersecurity.com. Goodbye.